very quickly to it. This is particularly important. US officials are suggesting that initial findings suggest that the missile that hit Poland was fired by Ukrainian forces at a possible incoming Russian missile. Now, this is according to reports. I'm going to go very quickly over to my colleague Zaka Jacob, who is bringing us minute-by-minute updates. Zaka, this was considered by experts to be one of the possible situations that could have taken place. Could you bring us more context?
So this is what the Associated Press is now reporting, quoting unnamed US officials, that the initial findings are that the missile that strayed into Poland was, although it was Russian-made, it was actually Ukraine that fired that missile and not Russia. And it was likely in response to the series of missile strikes that we've seen overnight over the last 24 hours in Ukraine. Of course, Russia launching a large number of those missiles into Ukraine in response to Vladimir Zelensky's address at the G20, saying that now is the time to put an end to this war. So there were over 100 missile strikes that happened over Ukrainian airspace over the last 24 hours. This particular missile that strayed into Poland, AP is now reporting, basis unnamed US officials, that this is their initial assessment, that it seems like it was fired by Ukraine. So it's likely one of these missile defense systems. Remember, Ukraine has the S-300s, the air defense systems. What they do is exactly how missiles work. Once a missile is set off from enemy country, your radars pick it up, and then you send another projectile, another missile, to try and intercept it midway. And this is how the US Patriot missiles worked in the Gulf War. This is exactly how air defense systems around the world work. So it is likely that this was fired from a Ukrainian air defense system to try and intercept a Russian missile, and then it accidentally strayed into Polish territory. So if this is the final conclusion that even the Polish authorities come to, then I think a major crisis would have been averted. But it also draws into question assertions that were made by Vladimir Zelensky. He, in fact, said that he spoke to his Polish counterpart, and then immediately after that, he came out and said that this was fired by Russia. So there is a divergence now between what Zelensky has said publicly and what US officials are saying, which is also perhaps why Biden, when he had the G7 meeting earlier today in Bali, when he was asked by reporters, he said it's unlikely from the trajectory that it was fired from Russia. So it looks like it is moving in the direction that this was fired by Ukraine in self-defense to that barrage of rocket attacks that we saw and missile attacks that we saw from Russia overnight.
Zaka, does a question remain on whether or not, once we do possibly in the next few hours get more of a confirmation on whether or not this was possibly Ukrainian, does a question remain on whether or not the Ukrainian president would possibly formally come out and acknowledge that, or are we unlikely to see that?
I don't think he will. I don't think there is any pressure on him to come out and clarify, and I honestly don't think he will come out and say that it was a Ukrainian self-defense mechanism that actually sort of led to this missile straying. I think it's important to see what the Polish authorities come to, what their conclusion is going to be. Remember, that's what Biden said as well, that they're going to wait for the Polish authorities. They have to take the lead in this investigation. After all, this missile strayed into Polish territory. The two citizens who died were Polish nationals. So he's giving the lead to the Polish authorities to come to a conclusion on what their assessment is, what their finding is, from where did this missile actually launch. If they come to the same conclusion as these preliminary findings, which American officials are telling AP, then I think, like I said, this would be a huge crisis averted, because then Chapter 5 of NATO does not kick in. This will not be construed as an attack on a NATO member, on an ally, which thereby would entail that all the other members of the alliance would also have to respond. But nonetheless, it does portend to the kind of risks that Ukraine is facing, and the risks of any kind of a miscalculation or a misfiring or an accidental straying, which could lead us to the precipice of possibly a much larger war than what it already has been for the last 9 months.
Zaka, thank you for providing us with that context. Now, we have Dr. Swasti Rao. She's an associate fellow at the Manohar Parrikar IDSA. She's with us this morning. We're going to go over to her right now for more context. Doctor, we are potentially looking at a far more de-escalated situation than one we were looking at a few minutes ago. But I do want to ask you a follow-up question here. If it is possibly found and confirmed by sources that the origin of this missile was indeed in Ukraine, I want to understand from you, what will the conversation then between President Duda in Poland and the Ukrainian president then look like?
Right. So first of all, good morning. Yes, I've been, following this development since actually early morning, according to India time. So, well, I think what you are trying to get at is this possible scenario if it is a Russian attack, and if so, is it purpose, if it is done purposely, or is it just an accident, right? So this is perhaps the two scenarios that are emerging. Now, before I get to the scenarios, let me just try to, clarify a few things that Zaka also mentioned. But let me just clarify. You see, for the invocation of Article 5, it takes three scenarios. Okay. Either it is a major attack on NATO territory or Polish territory, or there is a nuclear attack on the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, or there is a nuclear attack on Ukraine. So this kind of attack, which looks like a stray attack, from the Russian side or the Ukrainian side, there has been no confirmation. The only, so to say, evidence right now that we have suggests that it is Russian made, does not really qualify as a major attack. Let me also tell you something that you perhaps may have missed.
Doctor, one second. Doctor, 1 second. I just do also want to bring to you the update that Zaka, my colleague, has just brought us just a few minutes ago. He was saying that initial sources coming in from the United States right now are saying that it's possible that what actually took place was that this was a Ukrainian missile trying to ward off a Russian attack. So currently it does seem as if, according to the most recent intelligence, the source could indeed be Ukrainian.
I'm just saying that it could be an either scenario, and then it is very much likely, you please understand that this is not the first time that the Russia-Ukraine war has spilled into other territory.
Right.
You see, the Russia-Ukraine war has already spilled into the territory of Moldova. The point is that Moldova is not really a NATO member, so it does not really trigger the same kind of frenzy as this attack on the Polish village is invoking. That's one. And the background to this attack is that the Russian forces have conducted the largest set of missile strikes against Ukraine in the last 24 hours after their defeat in the key city of Kherson. So all this is happening. And by the way, let me also tell you that the Ukrainian General Staff has also reported that the Ukrainian air defenses shot down 73 Russian cruise missiles and all the drones on November 15th. So it is very much likely that in the in this entire hullabaloo of shooting down the Russian missiles, this particular set of missiles could have gone astray and hit the border across the border in Poland. It is very much possible. But I think the point is that it is not really a scenario that would either trigger Article 5 of the NATO collective defense. Okay, Article 4, yes. If you remember, the G7 and the NATO members they are all most of the world leaders are already in Bali right now. Okay, and they would have an emergency meeting, and even NATO is going to have an emergency meeting, but under the details of Article 4. And understand the basic difference also. Article 4 is about discussing and trying to think of coordinated action in that likely scenario, how to sort of go about it. While Article 5 is about a military attack. Okay, so it is Article 4. This is nothing that is something out of the blue in this war. But you know what? But my caution is that what it shows, whether it is from the Russian side or from the Ukrainian side, what it shows is the increasing use of imprecise weapons. And why I say that from the Russian side also this is very troublesome, because you see all the attacks that we have seen from the Russian side on the Ukrainian civilian infrastructure also says